One of the key topics of discussion here is the sheer number of people who are asking what happens to UK exports in the event that the Cabinet Office decides to make defence cuts. Secretary of State Fallon has talked that tough choices will have to be made, as other service chiefs have. At the same time, he's driven the message home that the UK is committed to spending. But in the event that there are defence cuts, what are the potential implications on defence exports? I mean, is that a factor that goes through your mind as the head of defence exports?
Yes, it's something we have to consider, because basically we are able to work very closely with our friends and allies overseas on defence capability through the use of that equipment by our own armed forces. So if you're by that virtue, if you're not using it, then of course you may suffer some degradation in what you're able to demonstrate to those overseas capabilities. So that, in theory, is the situation. However, where we are at the moment, even facing those pressures, is the delivery of a significant new amount of capability going forwards, and the announcements of things like the new shipbuilding program, what we're doing with new frigates, Type 26, what we're doing in the land area, what we're doing in the combat air area, are new reasons to go back and have another conversation, because all of these will be in service with our armed forces. So in theory, you're right, but actually in practice going forwards, even with the pressure of those cuts, we think there's enough new capability that are going to keep our exports in a growth potential over the next 10 years.
And before we go, I mean, one thing which I do have to ask you is that there was a drop. It was $7.5 billion, if I remember correctly, and then last year was a $5 billion year about, and you had prided yourself on getting record-achieving numbers. But this business, as we've talked, is lumpy sometimes. Talk to us about that drop and where you project yourself to be at the end of 2017.
Sure. Well, we like to consider, you'll know that in the defence industry, it's a very long-term campaign process. People do not make decisions in the short term. Rarely do they make decisions in year. These are the subject of many years of building up both the confidence in the capability, the joint working between the armed forces, and then getting to contract on a defence export. Typically, we see that cycle from the data we've got over the last few decades, actually, as being between 3 and 5 years it takes to do that. And as a result of that, depending on what you're doing in year, the in-year picture is a very small snapshot of that overall trend. And so we tend to look at it more on a 10-year rolling average basis, because that gives us a much clearer picture of those, if you like, 2 blocks of 5. And we can see there what's happened with the rolling average of those contracts. Some years that goes down, as it did last year, and some years it goes way above the average. So we would say that we're around about the 8 billion mark on average if we look at that 10-year period. And from time to time, other nations will have a spike as they win one contract on a platform, then nothing for a couple of years, and then back up again. It's that sort of characteristic. So although it was down last year, we're very confident that that 10-year rolling average going forwards, with what we can see in the pipeline for the next 5 years in particular, is an upward trend.